this has sent warning signals across the world. We are going straight to London, where Elizabeth Braw is joining us live. Elizabeth, how is UK viewing this development?
Well, it's really extraordinary news. Now we should remember that it's in the Russia-Ukraine war. When Russia, in this case, says something, we should await confirmation, and that's, I think, what we're all waiting for now. This is clearly breaking news, and we don't have anything other than the Russian side at the moment.
Yes, that's right. We don't have, because, we are going with the statement that has been, released by Russia, because it says there was an attempt at, on the life of the president of the Russian Federation. But will there be an attempt or an effort by US and UK to independently verify this?
That will, for sure. We should remember that that's what we have diplomats for in countries, and on top of that we have intelligence services. Every country does, and the UK and the US have very good intelligence services. But we should also remember that in this war, Russia hasn't exactly been a paragon of truth. Russia has released a number of statements that then turned out to be inaccurate. So we would do well to wait for verification, first to hear Ukraine's response to these allegations, and then to hear whatever information Western governments and indeed other governments manage to find about this. Because at the moment it's a statement put out by Russia, and Russia has put out inflammatory statements before in this war.
Yes, but even if we were to see this as, yes, the Russians have not painted the right picture of the war, so would be the case with the Ukrainians. But now Russia is saying that it reserves the right to retaliate. So this war, if anything, 400 days and counting, it's only likely to escalate. That will be certainly a huge concern for the world at large.
This is indeed the risk. So whatever Ukraine says, whatever third parties say, Western governments, other governments, including the government of India, perhaps, whatever those governments say, Russia has now essentially escalated the situation by saying there has been an attack on Putin, and it follows that then Russia reserves the right for itself to retaliate, and that really is an extremely dangerous situation, because Russia won't listen to anybody who says, well, it wasn't this information that you're putting out is inaccurate. Russia has put out information that it believes is accurate, or has just made up. Anyway, whatever the case, the information is out there, and Russia is going to retaliate, and this is a very serious situation. And that's where one would hope that governments that have somewhat friendly relations with Russia would be able to intervene, because it's in nobody's interest that this war escalate further.
But Elizabeth, the Kremlin is actually linking this to May 9th. I've been reading reports which suggest that the Kremlin is saying that the May 9th Victory Day parade would go ahead in Moscow despite the incident. And this is the state-run TASS, TASS news agency which is reporting that. And, Victory Day is certainly very key for Putin, who often evokes the spirit of, sacrifice and his commitment to Russia. So his presence becomes important, and an alleged assassination attempt by Ukraine. Alleged, I'm saying, because these are, of course, it's the fog of war, as we say. This is an indication, and now the news is coming in, of the jets being on standby.
It is such a dangerous situation. And as you say, the victory parade on the 9th of May is by tradition a very high profile event in Russia, where the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in World War II is celebrated, and the Red Army and Soviet citizens made great sacrifices during World War II to help defeat Nazi Germany. But in recent years, Putin has been capitalizing on this World War II victory commemoration to raise his own standing. And we should remember that at last year's victory parade, he didn't exactly have very much to celebrate in terms of victory over Ukraine. So it stands to reason that this year he will want to show a bit more of a more success
Elizabeth,
against
just
Ukraine.
hold on to your thoughts. We are going straight to Eastern Ukraine, where CNN's Nick Robertson is joining me live. Nick, thank you so much. Is Putin preparing now for an all-out offensive?
It isn't clear. It seems unlikely. There have been a couple of attacks this week, and we don't know who's perpetrated the attacks, but attacks inside Russia, just over the border, targeting supply lines. Twice on a train route, a supply line route inside Russia that supplies Russian troops inside Ukraine, hit two times this week. In one instance, 20 carriages were destroyed, and just this morning, a huge fuel store depot at a southern Russian military facility, not far again from the border with Ukraine, was hit. So there's been an up-tempo of actions inside of Russia. We don't have any information at all that confirms or corroborates what the Kremlin is claiming about these drones that were intercepted over the Kremlin. Ukraine is saying that it's not them, that this is trickery from Russia, that Russia is trying to sort of build up support for the May Day victory parades that you were just talking about there. I think at the moment the best interpretation on this is a potential for what Russia has done before, for a false flag operation, for something to happen, for Russia to claim it was Ukraine, and then have some kind of military action off the back of that. But an all-out offensive by Russia really doesn't seem very likely at this stage. It is Ukraine that is postured and prepared for a potential offensive, even in the areas where Russia is pushing, and it is on the offensive, like Bakhmut, for example. They take only meters a day, and that's only in the areas where they put a huge amount of effort in. So it doesn't appear as if Russia is ready to respond with some kind of military offensive ground action. It is Ukraine, on the other hand, that seems better prepared for that at the moment.
Nick, the war has been on for 400 days. What are the challenges faced by the Putin war machine, both in Ukraine and in Moscow?
We don't get accurate information from the Kremlin. We do get insights from the infighting that's happening within the Kremlin and with its proxies. Yevgeny Prigozhin of the Wagner mercenary group has complained multiple times that his troops in Bakhmut are not getting the ammunition they require, not getting the artillery support and fire that they need, not the ammunition for their weapons in the fight. Russia's problem is not just that it has lost a lot of military hardware, tanks, armoured personnel carriers. It lost a lot in the beginning of the war, and it's consuming a lot at the front line, throwing untrained men in with equipment, and it's losing a lot of men. According to the Pentagon, Russia has lost 20,000 troops and had 100,000 injured so far this year. Ukrainian forces say that Russia uses waves of recruits straight out of jail or straight off the street with very little training. So Ukrainians and NATO say that Russia's losses of men and materiel are high. So those are some of the constraints put on the Kremlin, that their ability to supply isn't where they want it to be. We heard from Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, just over the past couple of days, saying that if there are shortages, then commanders need to flag those shortages early. We know that Russia has put up production in its ammunition factories, in some cases to 3 shifts a day, 24 hours a day. President Putin, over the past couple of months, has toured some of those factories. So we know that their military capability to produce enough ammunition is struggling by their actions and by the words of some of their commanders, and by the words of Ukraine, that Russia is losing a lot of troops.
My last question to you, Nick. Given Western military aid for Ukraine, are Ukrainian forces capable of launching such a strike on Kremlin, if we are to believe the Russians?
It's not clear. Ukraine says it didn't launch this, it wasn't responsible. Ukraine says that it will fight with all the means it has on its own territory. All the incidents that I've talked about that have happened over the borders this week and in the past few weeks, Ukraine hasn't claimed them. It indicates that it thinks it might be partisans inside Russia, anti-Putin, anti-Kremlin elements inside Russia. That's not clear. But I think the idea that that there might be a larger uprising inside Russia seems hugely unlikely. The idea that Ukraine has everything that it needs to launch a hugely successful counteroffensive. I don't think there's any military strategist on the side in Ukraine that thinks that's possible, that they know that there are over 300,000 Russian troops inside Ukrainian territory. That's triple the number there were at the beginning of the invasion. They know that the odds against them, that Russia has a lot of people in the way and in the positions and very well dug in exactly the places where Ukraine wants to advance. So I don't think the Ukrainians think that this is going to be easy. What they think is it's a fight. It's their country. They're prepared for the fight. They'll take it on with what they have. And there's a lot of men that know, frankly, that they may have to sacrifice their lives to achieve it. And this, they think, on the Ukrainian side, is an advantage they have over the Russians, because they tell us that they don't think the Russians have that level of morale. In fact, I talked to a soldier just today who said he came across Russian forces in the front line recently, and the indications they had there were that the Russians were not up for the fight in the same way that he and his troops were.
Nick Robertson, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and stay safe there. You're slipping into a short break. Up next, in the wake of this stunning charge from Russia, we get you a special report from Ground Zero in Kyiv. Stay tuned.